This is the closest Iron Man has ever come to death. Tony was seen lying weakly on the floor. He opened his badly damaged helmet, preparing to record his final moments. Please don't. When I fly up, I'll be there for a long time. Stay here, Tony. In Avengers Infinity War, due to Thor's failure to kill Thanos, the enemy snapped his fingers, causing cosmic devastation. Half of all life in the universe turned to dust. Only Tony and Nebula survived on Titan in order to return to Earth. Tony worked tirelessly day and night to repair and modify the spaceship. But even so, the spacecraft still stopped, thousands of light years away from Earth in outer space. By this time, food and oxygen were nearly depleted. Tony lay on the floor in despair, waiting for death to come as they were about to suffocate due to lack of oxygen. Suddenly, a bright light from outside the ship shone on Tony's face. At that moment, he finally saw hope. It was Captain Marvel. She carried the spaceship to safely return the two to Earth. The Avengers rallied to support each other, but Tony's first words were, "Lost again." In the conference room, Tony looked at the humans who had vanished. He could no longer control his emotions in Avengers, Age of Ultron. He talked about using technology to arm the Earth, but everyone opposed him. Now Tony no longer believes in facing things together, as the others suggest. He directly removed the nanocore from his chest and handed it to them. "Here, take this. You find it. You put that on. You hide." Then he fainted due to exhaustion. At this time, Rocket discovered 2.5 days ago on a planet similar to Earth. There was another energy surge from the Infinity Stones. It must be Thanos using the stones again. So everyone decided to find Thanos and take back the stones, then use the power of the stones to save everyone. Meanwhile, Thanos had already settled into a simple, mundane farm life, but he looked like he had just been through a great battle, walking with a noticeable limp, just as he was about to prepare a meal. Suddenly, a powerful energy descended from the sky. The team quickly rushed forward and grabbed him by the throat. Banner seized the Infinity Gauntlet. Thor, without a word, directly chopped off Thanos' left hand with an axe. But when Rocket turned over the gauntlet, however, they discovered that the gems had already vanished into thin air. It turned out that Thanos felt the current universe had already achieved balance. Keeping the gems would only be a temptation with no real purpose. So, 2.5 days ago, he used the gems' conflicting nature to destroy all of them. The last hope was also shattered. In a fit of rage, Thor immediately chopped off Thanos' head. Although the culprit had been eliminated, everyone fell into endless grief because of this. Without the gems, they could no longer save the extinct human beings. They thought everything was beyond recovery. However, one day, 5 years later, in an old, run-down warehouse, an ant accidentally turned on the switch to the quantum realm, sending the trapped Scott Lang back to reality. He walked down the street with a dazed expression, completely unaware of what had happened. The once bustling and crowded streets were now completely empty. Looking at the numerous missing person posters on the telephone poles and countless tombstones in the square, Scott finally realized something was terribly wrong. He frantically searched the tombstones for his daughter Cassie's name, but found his own name on one as well, so he desperately ran home. Fortunately, amidst the misfortune, Cassie was safe and sound. Seeing his now grown-up daughter Scott also realized he had only been in the quantum realm for a few hours while 5 years had passed in the real world. So he rushed to the Avengers compound to tell Captain America and Black Widow about his discovery. Due to the different time rules in the quantum realm, the 5 years they experienced had only been 5 hours in the quantum realm. So he boldly suggested if they could control the time spent in the quantum realm, they could use this time difference to achieve time travel, go back to before Thanos destroyed the gems, and save all those who had been wiped out. To determine if this method was feasible, they immediately sought out the reclusive Tony Stark. This might be Iron Man's happiest 5 years, and it's the scene all Marvel fans have been longing to see. Tony no longer has the arc reactor on his chest, spending each day with his loved ones, enjoying a blissful retirement by the lakeside. He even had an adorable daughter with Pepper, surrounded by his wife and child, the epitome of domestic bliss. However, the appearance of an unexpected visitor shattered this idyllic life. Scott tells Tony about the time heist plan. Retrieve the Infinity Stones from the past, bring them to the present, and snap everyone back to existence. After hearing this, Tony felt the plan was too risky and almost impossible to succeed. He couldn't bear to lose his beloved wife and daughter again, so he firmly refused. Seeing Tony's resolute attitude, Scott didn't know what else to say. With no other choice, they decided to seek Banner's help. The current Banner has achieved a perfect fusion of Hulk's strength and his own intellect. Although Banner wants to save humanity from extinction, time travel isn't exactly his area of expertise. However, encouraged by Natasha, Banner agrees to give it his best shot. Scott then activates the quantum device, accidentally turning himself into a baby. Luckily, Natasha quickly shuts off the power, and Scott successfully reverts to his normal self. Banner finds it quite amusing, while Scott is left speechless. But what about Tony? Will he really remain silent on this? Of course not. When he sees a photo of himself with Peter Parker, his heart is filled with guilt and self-reproach. He then goes to his lab to simulate Scott's ideas. Surprisingly, he actually manages to create a working time travel device. Only in the Marvel universe could such a far-fetched idea become reality. Tony, working alone, cracks the problem, but upon seeing his daughter, he fears losing everything he now has. "I hope you can help me," he says, conflicted. At this moment, Tony's heart is deeply torn. He doesn't want his wife and daughter to worry, but he also can't stand by and let so many innocent lives perish. Pepper, sensing Tony's hesitation, tells him, "Trying to stop you is something I could never do in this lifetime." Faced with his wife's understanding and support, Tony immediately made a decision. The next day, Tony arrived at the Avengers base, bringing his self-developed time travel equipment. He returned the shield to Cap, and the two finally shook hands, making peace. With everything now ready, it was time to recall the other Avengers. Banner and Rocket arrived in New Asgard to find Thor, who had become self-destructive due to his failure to stop Thanos 5 years ago. He now spent his days playing video games, and his once proud abs had turned into a beer belly. Banner told him they'd found a way to save everyone, but Thor seemed indifferent. No matter what Banner said, Thor refused to join. Luckily, Rocket was clever enough to handle the situation. Meanwhile, Natasha found Clint alone. Since Thanos' snap wiped out half of all life, Clint was the only survivor in his family of 5. He had lost all hope in life. For the past 5 years, he had been traveling the world, eliminating criminals who should have died. Natasha's appearance rekindled his hope, and soon after, the team regrouped at the base. The clever Rhodes suggested, since we can travel through time and space, why not find Thanos as an infant? Banner explained that changing the past wouldn't alter the present. Once you travel to the past, that past becomes your future, and the present becomes the past of that future. Anything you do in that future can't change the past that's already happened. This means that even if we killed baby Thanos, it wouldn't change our present. Moreover, with Dr. Pym gone, they only had enough Pym particles for each person to time travel once. This mission had to succeed. Failure wasn't an option. Clint volunteered to test the time travel equipment. As the quantum tunnel activated, he successfully returned to the moment before the snap. He heard his family's voices, but before he could see them, he was transported back. The test was a great success. The team then analyzed the time and location of each Infinity Stone's appearance. They quickly divided into 3 teams, set to travel to different points in the past to retrieve the 6 Infinity Stones. As Black Widow said, "See you in a minute," everyone put on their helmets and rushed into the quantum tunnel together. The mission to obtain the stones and save all life had officially begun. Iron Man sneaks into Stark Tower. By this time, the Avengers have successfully defeated the other 2 armies, but the villain Loki only finds his situation more difficult. At this moment, the undercover Hydra agent from S.H.I.E.L.D. appears and takes Loki's mind scepter. Tony smoothly turns around, completing an impressive transformation in midair. Then, using thermal imaging, they discover the mind scepter is in the elevator. The American team immediately moves to intercept. Once again, it's a familiar elevator, a familiar scene. Everyone becomes tense, expecting another elevator battle. However, the quick-thinking American team diffuses the situation with just one sentence. The American team successfully retrieves the scepter, but they don't get far. The American team suddenly encounters their past selves, who mistake them for Loki in disguise. The American team has no choice but to engage in combat with their past selves. With identical weapons and moves, neither side can gain an advantage over the other. They fight from the top floor to the bottom, until finally the American team uses the scepter to subdue their past selves. That's America's ass. Meanwhile, Tony directs an Inhuman to infiltrate Iron Man's armor and cut off the power supply to the arc reactor. Past Tony suddenly can't breathe. In the chaos, the Inhuman kicks the Tesseract to Tony. But just as he's about to grab it, Hulk, coming down the stairs, accidentally knocks him away. The Tesseract rolls to Loki's feet, and he starts to taunt Loki by circling around him. Tony's in trouble now, as the remaining Pym particles are only enough for them to return to the future. Just as Scott is blaming Tony for messing everything up, Tony comes up with an idea that will both get them the Space Stone and replenish their Pym particles. He and the American team use their limited Pym particles to travel to 1970, when S.H.I.E.L.D. was first established. Tony quickly gets his hands on the Space Stone. However, just as he's about to pack up and leave, he runs into his father, Howard Stark. Seeing his father makes Tony particularly nervous, as if he's become a child again. Luckily, his father doesn't recognize Tony, but feels that he looks somewhat familiar, and the American team also successfully obtained the Pym particles. Before leaving, he saw the new recruit Peggy through the window, but the window was so wide open that everyone wondered if Peggy had noticed the American team. Meanwhile, Hulk found the Supreme Sorcerer, the Ancient One. Without saying a word, he prepared to snatch the Time Stone, but was swiftly knocked back by the Ancient One's power. Banner, looking desperate, realized he couldn't win by force. He had no choice but to explain the purpose of his mission to the Ancient One. However, the Ancient One still didn't believe him, because once the Time Stone was handed over, this timeline would lose its weapon against the forces of darkness. But Banner explained that as long as they returned the stones to their exact moments in time after using them, it would be as if nothing had ever happened. Even so, the Ancient One still believed the risk was too great. However, when Banner revealed that it was Dr. Strange who voluntarily gave up the Time Stone in the future, the Ancient One was astonished. Strange was their most talented sorcerer, and he must have had a good reason for doing so. Subsequently, the Ancient One sent Banner back to his body, and then willingly handed over the Time Stone. Meanwhile, Thor and Rocket had also returned to Asgard. They needed to extract the Reality Stone from Thor's ex-girlfriend. But when Thor saw his mother, he could no longer control his emotions, because today was the day his mother would be killed. So Thor followed her, and ended up being discovered by his mother. Despite Thor's best efforts to disguise himself, his mother, now elevated to a witch, immediately saw that he was from the future. "You're not Thor, I know," she said. Hearing this, Thor broke down like a heartbroken child, hugging his mother and crying. Thor wanted to warn his mother about what was about to happen, but she stopped him. His mother said that he needed to save his own future, not hers. At this point, Rocket had successfully retrieved the Reality Stone, and their mission was nearly complete. Thor hugged his mother goodbye, telling her to use her phone less and eat more vegetables. Just as Rocket was about to leave, Thor suddenly reached out the window and grabbed Mjolnir from 2013, excited to see he was still worthy to wield the hammer. On the other side, Rod and Nebula arrived at the core of Mora. Soon, they encountered the awkward Star-Lord from the dance troupe, looking at his intoxicated expression. "Is this your father?" "Yes." Unable to contain himself, Rod immediately threw a punch. Nebula took the key from him and opened the door to the treasure vault. Nebula then stretched out her metallic arm, slowly reaching into the barrier, and successfully retrieved the Power Stone. However, just as the two were preparing to return to the Avengers base, Nebula's system was invaded by an unknown program. It turned out that the Thanos of this timeline had discovered them. He captured Nebula and sent her past self to infiltrate the Avengers under a false identity. Meanwhile, Hawkeye and Black Widow arrived at Vormir. The rules remained unchanged. To obtain the Soul Stone, one must sacrifice the soul of the person they love most. Both of them seem to have already made up their minds. Black Widow flipped over, knocked Hawkeye down with an electric device, and then ran towards the cliff without looking back. Fortunately, Hawkeye reacted quickly. After knocking Black Widow down with his sword, he leaped off the cliff, only to be caught by her. She grabbed Hawkeye with a grappling hook, leaving them both hanging from the cliff. Hawkeye tried to pull Black Widow up, but it was impossible. Then, Black Widow pushed off with all her strength and fell silently. And so, a legendary heroine fell. When Hawkeye woke up in the river below, he had successfully obtained the Soul Stone. Afterward, everyone returned to the Avengers base. Banner, not seeing Black Widow, had just recovered enough to ask. Hawkeye knelt on the ground in grief, and everyone understood what had happened. To honor Black Widow's sacrifice, they decided to immediately forge the Infinity Gauntlet to save all the lives that had disappeared. In order to save humanity from Thanos' snap, Iron Man secretly crafted a pair of Infinity Gauntlets, all while keeping faith in their success. Now that the Infinity Gauntlet has been successfully created, who will be the one? It's important to note that ordinary people simply can't handle the power of the Infinity Stones. Thor bravely stepped forward, claiming he was the strongest Avenger and could definitely handle it. But given Thor's current condition, everyone was worried. They feared if he snapped, the Avengers might end up with one more brewery instead. At this moment, Banner volunteered, explaining that the stone's energy was mainly gamma radiation, and no one was more. Subsequently, everyone took defensive positions while Tony activated the base's lockdown protocol. As Banner slowly put on the Infinity Gauntlet, an immense surge of energy erupted, instantly enveloping his entire arm and continuously consuming his body. Fortunately, Banner managed to stabilize himself through sheer willpower, then mustered all his strength and with great difficulty snapped his fingers. Tony immediately provided cooling treatment. At that moment, the base's doors automatically opened, revealing a vibrant scene outside. With Hawkeye's wife calling to confirm their success, it was clear they had won. However, before they could celebrate, a massive warship appeared in the sky above them. In a matter of seconds, as dozens of shells rained down, the entire Avengers compound was reduced to rubble. It was revealed to be Nebula from an alternate past timeline, who had opened a quantum tunnel bringing Thanos' army from 2014 to the present. The Avengers were now trapped under the debris. Banner lifted a boulder, successfully saving Rhodes and the Ancient One. Ant-Man escaped danger due to his ability to shrink, while Hawkeye miraculously found the Infinity Gauntlet. To evade the pursuing alien monsters, he ran while fighting back. Having just dealt with the pursuers behind him, the alternate Nebula approached. Seeing the rescuers arrive, the unsuspecting Hawkeye handed him the glove. Luckily, past Gamora and future Nebula arrived just in time. The two joined forces to defeat past Nebula and reclaim the glove. Meanwhile, the three Avengers leaders finally assembled, watching Thanos playing in the mud. Thor, without a word, instantly transformed into the Thunder God, accompanied by a crackling lightning bolt. He wielded Mjolnir in his left hand and Stormbreaker in his right, facing the three Titans gradually surrounding him. Thanos remained unfazed, even declaring his intention to turn the entire universe to dust. He planned to use the Infinity Stones to recreate a universe where life only knows gratitude, not resentment. Born out of blood, you'll never know. Thor, enraged at not being invited for a drink, charged forward with a roar. Tony and Cap also attacked from different directions, with Tony and Thor using their 5-soul fusion technique. But unexpectedly, Thanos blocked all their attacks with his spinning blade. Thor, seeing the ineffectiveness of their assault, wanted to surprise Thanos with his hammer, but Thanos used Tony as a shield. Tony was knocked unconscious on the spot. Cap tried to engage, but Thanos floored him with a single punch. Thor was caught by Thanos during the fight and pinned to the ground, being hammered mercilessly. He attempted to recall Stormbreaker, but Thanos intercepted it mid-flight. Just as Thor was about to lose consciousness, Mjolnir suddenly moved on its own, striking Thanos before returning to Cap's hand. The Star-Spangled Hero had been hiding his ability to wield Mjolnir all along. Not only could he lift Thor's hammer, but he'd even practiced a set of combos in secret. Cap unleashed a flurry of hammer and shield attacks, leaving Thanos dazed, followed by a burst of lightning power. This electric therapy rattled Thanos, who then seized an opening in Cap's defense. Even Cap's seemingly indestructible shield was now Cap stood alone and outnumbered, facing thousands of Thanos shattered by Thanos, and despite his severe injuries, Cap showed no sign of backing down. Few blows. He stood up resolutely, readying himself for battle. Though the odds seemed insurmountable, a familiar voice suddenly reached his ears. Falcon, Black Panther, and others emerged from portals, followed by countless more opening behind them. The heroes Thanos thought he'd erased were all being teleported to the battlefield. Doctor Strange, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Spider-Man, Valkyrie, and Wanda appeared. Even Pepper joined the fray, while Hulk and War Machine burst from the ruins. At that moment, every superhero in the Marvel Universe had assembled. The ultimate endgame had finally begun.